Right. This morning, we're going to be talking about U.S. foreign assistance and the role that the U.S. plays in alleviating and addressing world hunger. Right at the beginning, I want to get out of the way a whole idea of the terminology. There's a lot of words thrown around as to what U.S. foreign assistance is, U.S. development assistance, foreign assistance. There are actually four categories that we'll explain a bit. We're not going to get into too much gory detail in this lecture. This is meant to be an introduction to U.S. foreign aid. But there are a few of these concepts that I think it's important to explain and differentiate. The first one is the international affairs budget. That is the budget of the U.S. government called the 150 account. So it's 150 account, international affairs, and it's a very broad budget line that covers foreign aid, development assistance, poverty-focused development, humanitarian programs, embassy expenses, that type of thing. Then there's foreign aid. You'll hear foreign aid talked about quite a bit, and this is what most people think of as simply money going abroad to help poor people. It's actually much more than that, of course. There's official development assistance, ODA, which is a term used by the DAC and the OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. Basically, it's all of the players in the world who are donors. So think of not necessarily all first world countries, because there are a number of countries in the world who you don't necessarily think of as first world, but who also make a contribution to international development. And then finally, what we call poverty-focused development aid. And for many people, that's what they think of foreign aid again as being. That's focused specifically on alleviating poverty in the third world. These are all different categories. Some of them overlap, some of them are connected, but these words are often, these concepts and these definitions are often confused, and the words are used interchangeably. So first off, what is U.S. foreign assistance? Let's start with the famous who, how, why, where, what kind of questioning. So for who, what is U.S. foreign assistance and who is it for? Well, it's a transfer of resources from the U.S. to developing countries generally and to some strategic allies who aren't necessarily developing countries. How? How? It's money generally, cash, cold cash, via loans that have to be repaid. In particular, these loans often are what we call concessional loans, in that they are loans that are made at very low interest rates. Oftentimes, the loans are even forgiven, and then they basically convert to a grant. A grant means obviously cash is being given with no interest and no expectation of it being repaid, or it can be a contribution of goods. Food aid, generally, that would come through like the World Food Program or many of the U.S. NGOs who are involved in programming food aid abroad. So it can be in kind or as goods. And then technical assistance. And technical assistance refers to generally U.S. experts being sent out to the third world to help and advise in third world development, in particular development programs. Why? Well, why is there U.S. foreign assistance? There are many foreign policy goals that we'll touch on in a moment. But there's a variety of reasons, and they don't necessarily always have to do with what we would define as development or assistance to the third world. So what? These are the categories then of U.S. assistance and how it's set up. National security interests and foreign policy interests would be first. So an example would be Uzbekistan and Pakistan, and there is an agreement in exchange to use military bases in their country in exchange for particular support that the U.S. provides to support the U.S. programs, the U.S. Military operations in Afghanistan. That would be an example of foreign aid being used for national security and foreign policy interests. Then another category would be political development and stability, conflict prevention to prevent peace after conflict, and to strengthen failed states. And another example would be perhaps the U.S. involvement currently in Somalia, which many consider to be a failed state. A few years back, it would be, another example would be the Camp David Accords. There was a lot of food aid provided through various food aid programs of the U.S. government to Egypt, much of it in response or as a significant support level to recognize that Egypt had been very, very cooperative in working with Israel to reach the Camp David Accords. So it's like a political payment at times to support key allies or countries that the U.S. would like to have as allies, and they support them with foreign assistance. Then, of course, this is an area that most of us think as being the main reason for U.S. foreign aid, besides development assistance to the third world, for community development and alleviating poverty and in hunger, the immediate humanitarian needs that occur at the time of a sudden onset disaster, natural disaster like the earthquake in Haiti, for example. And this is to countries suffering famine, suffering from a particular disaster that has befallen them, to help them recover from that disaster, and also more and more in the world today to assist countries where large segments of the population have been displaced by conflict. The longer term development purposes that are generally well known for, but again, most people assume foreign aid is all about, is to fight poverty, support agriculture, build roads, infrastructure, educate children, as we've talked about in this class, build health care capacity, create small businesses, spur economic growth. This is all long-term development purposes for which U.S. development assistance will be provided.